This presentation is around a merger and acquisition playbook, your roadmap to a perfect first day. And that's a critical concept, the perfect first day, because the C-suite imagines that every merger and acquisition is going to be smooth, it's going to be easy, we're going to get all these synergies, save all this money, and we'll be able to show the stockholders after the first quarter the value of this acquisition that we did. We'll talk about the challenges around doing that and how you may actually be able to get there. My name is Ellery. I'm the Vice President of Solutions Architects at Radian Logic, and I appreciate you being here today. This is about a 5,000% increase from the audience I had last year at Identiverse. In fact, I recognized one face that was in the audience last year. I did ask them to put a lot of extra chairs in the room so we can socially distance, so I'm glad they did that, so we have lots of room here to spread out. So let me just give you a little bit of an idea about where we come from our perspective around mergers and acquisitions, and really, why do companies merge? And it may seem obvious or it may seem really kind of crazy, because a merger is a very disruptive process, especially to us folks in the IT environment. And unfortunately, we're usually the last ones to find out about it through legal restrictions on how much information can be shared, the fact that IT is the last person that people think about. We're the last ones to know that the companies are merging together, and usually often told, hey, you know, on Monday we're acquiring this new company, you guys need to get them up and running and incorporated using our systems as fast as possible. But companies are merging because the concept is that these two companies together are going to be more valuable, more efficient. They're going to be able to produce more revenue. They're going to have a higher value for shareholders if I put these companies together. And that one company has really amazing processes and ways to do things, supply chain, and other functions that the company being acquired can benefit from. Or the company being acquired has technology that the parent company really wants but can't build out on their own, so they go out and buy that information. They buy that technology. Now, day one access needs, this is the concept of what the C-suite is thinking of. Everyone should be able to work together immediately. I need to start showing value from this acquisition in the moment that the acquisition takes place. And if you tell me it's going to be 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 3 years before my organizations are fully merged and integrated together, that really puts a crimp in the style of the presentation at the next shareholders meeting, that we bought this company and now we're basically carrying this 300-pound albatross around our neck as we slowly try and consume it. So we want to look at a model where we can actually start to deliver on that dream. But the problem is the traditional methods for doing merger and acquisition from the IT side, they take too long and they cost too much. And I'll actually go through some examples and sort of show you the illustrations. If you've been through a merger and acquisition, and if you look at most companies of size, they've either been acquired, they've acquired somebody, they've gone through some sort of merger and acquisition over their lifetime. You have a sense of this particular experience. And the time to value for that merger, the ability to actually show those synergies, is directly related back to how the two organizations can work together. Can I have a scenario where I'm getting all the benefits of all the synergies of these brilliant minds being able to access my applications and my information, my security system being able to secure the other organization and make sure that they're not vulnerable to anything, the ability for us to start sharing customer information and start leveraging a much bigger and more robust model. All those pieces are necessary to deliver, and if you can deliver that, there is a tremendous amount of value. So that little jet just flew by for no reason at all. But I do want to give you some examples of the pitfalls of a merger and acquisition. And this is sort of our working model for what that environment looks like. I have company A with a whole bunch of sources of identity, which is normal in most of our environments. We have users in directories, databases. Now we have users in the cloud. I've got people up in Okta and Azure and Salesforce and ServiceNow. I've got old legacy platforms. I may have mainframes rattling around in my platform. All these different systems are working today inside my company, but within their own little silos, in their own little worlds, talking to their own little set of people. The company I'm acquiring likely has something very similar. Now, a lot of times if you talk to an organization, the CISO on one side is terrified of the potential security risks of the other organization because he knows how hard he's worked to lock everything down on his side, get virus scanning on all their systems, make sure all their firewall ports are properly managed, putting in zero trust infrastructure and really managing these endpoints. But the challenge they're going to have is that the other organization may not be actually that mature. So when you join two organizations together by throwing up a VPN or a tunnel and putting on a trust between 80 domains, you just basically opened your house up to everybody in the neighborhood. And that may not be safe, that may not be appropriate. So you need to find a way to work together without that sort of merging together very quickly. I'm going to take a second here and plug this in. I was betting my laptop could go 2 hours, but you know, just to be safe. Okay, there you go. Oh, and I'll put this in my pocket. There we go. So I have these two organizations. I've got some innate challenges. Cross-entity application access is difficult. I have potentially duplicate identities in both environments, so simply creating someone's account on the new platform or moving them over may not be an option. I've got to roadmap out my data source migration because eventually I want to consolidate all my sources of identity together. I want to get to a simpler world. I can't manage this diversity. Although we often talk to people that will say, you know, we've got an 80 domain hanging off our network from a merger we did 3 years ago because there are 3 applications that require that information in that extended schema and structure, and we can't get rid of it because our modern 80 doesn't look anything like that, so we're stuck in that particular world. You can undo you can take the Mac out. I already unplugged it. Thank you. And then basically, at the end, I'm going to migrate my applications. I want to bring all my applications together. There are applications on the company I'm acquiring that I want to run off of my system. I don't want to manage multiple single sign-on solutions. I don't want to manage multiple IGA platforms. But that's not uncommon either. We talk to a lot of customers. We ask, well, what do you have for IGA? Oh, we got one of everybody. We got an Oracle, we got a Saviynt, we got a SailPoint. What do you do for HR? Well, we've got Workday, we've got PeopleSoft, we've got Hewitt. They have this accumulation of systems because the challenge to get off of them was very difficult and very hard. And you're looking for an end state, basically, of an M&A playbook. How do I actually do this effectively? Well, let's take a look at some of the traditional models. So I've got my primary acquiring company here. I have the company that I'm going to be acquiring. And I can just go ahead and start putting connections between all these systems and start letting people willy-nilly log in and authenticate across those platforms. But the challenge is that my applications in Company A don't recognize Company B users, so I may have to create copies of Company B users over in Company A for them to be able to access their systems, and I end up with challenges with duplication, I end up with challenges with security. This is a very unsupportable model. Alternatively, I can actually just lift everything up off of their data center and slip it into my data center and double my challenge, double my chaos. This gets the two companies in one building, but it's not necessarily a solution to the challenge. And again, I get into this model I have one of everything. And I have no way of getting out from under that because the dependencies I created now are so woven into my fabric that I can't undo that mess. Or the other model is, oh, we're just going to provision everybody from the new company into our existing system. So eventually we'll move them over, but we're really upset because now they have 2 accounts and they're not sure which password to use and they're different passwords and they keep calling the help desk and the CISO's upset because no one's happy because the system isn't working smoothly. And this isn't really a model to handle that either, especially if you've got scale. If you're putting together a company with 10,000 people, another company with 10,000 people, the chaos you create when you start just provisioning people in, and when you've got Jay Smith in one company and Jay Smith in another that are different people, but they both live in AD, somebody's changing their login credential, and no one's ever happy. You end up building a hierarchy of titles to decide who gets to keep their login and who gets to lose it. And when a CFO overrules a CMO, then there's going to be trouble. So this isn't a model that's really sustainable either. You really want to be able to look at how can we do this in an effective way. The first step is let's inventory what you have. Let's take a look at what you have in these 2 environments and start making some decisions around that. The value of Radiant Logic is that we can look into that new acquisition without exposing your network to any threats. You're not opening the door and browsing their AD domain through a trust. You're looking at it through the glass of Radiant Logic, who's able to examine that information, bring it forward, and allow you to start to aggregate and correlate users in a virtual world that isn't affecting the back ends. I can model this information, I can do what ifs, I can do data analysis and see where my overlapping identities are. I can look for common identifiers. I can build out a world that I want to have before I ever move a single piece on the back end. And also, too, I can rationalize groups. Groups are the #1 source of authorization in organizations. They still are. I've got nested groups in the company that I'm acquiring that nobody can tell me who are in these groups because of the nature of nesting themselves. So I can unnest these groups. I can flatten them out. I can start to do authorization analysis. I can start to build these profiles and potentially bring them into my existing governance platform in a much more visible, much more exposed way and start to manage those. And I can also build groups that are combinations. Sales in one organization may not mean the same thing as sales in the other, but everybody in the sales group in company B needs to go into the product marketing group in company A. I can do that kind of manipulation and move groups around and aggregate group information because I have control over groups just like I have control over the users. And then again, creating application-specific views of the data so I'm not having to rejigger my applications. I don't have to reformat my information. The application has a way it wants to see information. We mold the identity data to meet the application's requirements instead of telling the application to change. The other piece is you've got to do this at speed. This has to be available at the speed of a directory. It has to be authentication authorization speed. If merging these companies together slows everything down, it's going to be visible, and you're going to hear about it, and people are going to complain, and things will get escalated. So you have to do this in a way that almost appears transparent to the user. And this is where Radiant Logic comes into play. This is the piece that we play in this particular scenario. Now, there's a lot on this slide, but I'll kind of go left to right. If you look at the left-hand side, there is all the sources of identity information. They can exist in both environments. So imagine that being all of company A and all of company B's source of information. It's not just employees now. There's partners that are critical to company B's functions that need to come along. Half of my contingency workforce is contractors. I can't just leave them behind. And now I've got customers. That was the reason we bought you. All this data, the devices, the things on their network, they have to be able to be visible and be able to be included in this model. Bring them into Radiant Logic, and we let you manage that data abstracted from the sources of information. So I can correlate, I can integrate, I can aggregate, normalize, manage that data, and then feed it into each of the components in my identity data fabric, that gray column there. These are the engines of identity management that you're using today. You've got an access management platform. You've got a governance platform. You're probably doing privileged account management. You've probably got security analytics and reporting going on. You want to integrate your identities from the new organization into your infrastructure or bring their superior product into your infrastructure. To do that, you need to tailor the data from both worlds to look like those systems expect it. And then you'll get out of that zero trust, multi-cloud integration, on-premise management of legacy information, and the ability to federate your applications and your access. So key capabilities are aggregation, the ability to actually build a rich profile of information, because I want to be able to provide my access management layer, my governance tool, my PAM platform with as rich a set of information as possible. The session I did right before this was all around zero trust. If you're doing a merger and acquisition, you are pulling out the hood off your car and you're going to do some major rework on your environment, it's a great time to start looking at implementing more modern security processes and technologies into your system. So the ability to build a rich aggregated global profile feeds that data into your system, and those profiles are user-specific and tailored to the requirements of the application. Also, the idea of identity correlation. I've got identifiers in systems that belong to the same person with a different identifier. Lana Landry here needs to be able to have an aggregated profile. If I'm migrating her from one platform to another and I create temporary accounts, I need to be able to join those together so that Lana doesn't have that frustration. But I can't put Steve and Sarah Matthews together because they're different people. And she's the CFO and he's actually a mail clerk, and they wouldn't be really happy sharing the same profile because they would have either too much or too little access in their system. So I want to be able to make sure when I'm putting these two companies together, I'm not inadvertently creating conflict security issues. And again, I can model all this ahead of moving things around. But then also I need to be able to pull forward all the identity data from all the platforms on each of these systems into a rich global profile, because that provides me now with a unified set of identity information that I can then control and feed out to each of my applications in my identity management stack that control access to applications in Company A, but also let Company A employees, contractors, and customers access Company B resources day one. This is the first phase of the process. Get this in place, get this integration in place. I still have an abstraction layer that secures my environment. People can't wander willy-nilly from one side to the other. A security breach on one side is not going to transit across, but I can start to control and move identity access and authorization across the organization, so it appears virtually as if I've put these two organizations together by connecting this data source on the back end together. Then I want to start looking at aggregating the back end data sources, moving my application information forward, brokering my authorization of those applications. And as I move through that, I've aggregated the back end data now into a more normalized system. But because I've abstracted the applications and access control and governance from the back end data, they don't know that anything changed. I didn't break my IGA platform. It may be used to seeing F-name and L-name because that's the way Workday put out user information, but now we're on PeopleSoft and it's first name and last name. But I can filter that in Radian and still deliver to my application F-name and L-name because that's what it was built to do and built to see. So any disruption from this aggregation of sources of identity can be obscured from the applications by Radiant Logic and much more easily managing that integration of that system. And now once I put that together, I can stage that information, I can move it over in a controlled manner, do this in a highly available model, so I have scale, I have structure, I have everything I need to do that. And again, insulating those applications from change. Once I've consolidated my backends, because my backends are insulated from my applications, I now only have one place for my applications to go to access data. So as I narrow down, as I standardize on certain platforms, I don't have to decide to connect that platform to a dozen different backend places. I connect it solely to Radiant Logic. The SSO system sees one big flat list of users across the merged organization. The access management and provisioning system sees multiple feeds from those sources, but all in a normalized manner with common identifiers, unnested groups, everything it needs to do administration on that. And I can make this available to my applications, whether they are Company A or Company B applications. So I'm going to be able to integrate these environments together, start to work as one organization, and minimize the overhead, and start to deliver on what the C-level suite was looking for, which was scale and the ability to use the same infrastructure and the same implementation across my organization. So the symbiosis of my applications now makes it much less expensive for me to maintain a smaller set of systems. Now we also have another scenario here that exists in two different worlds. One is cross-entity collaboration. I have to work with a partner in another organization. I'm an oil and gas company, and I have half a dozen companies that I work with to do oil exploration and work in my oil fields, and are ones that I partner with on particular projects. But one partner may be a partner of mine on one project, a competitor of mine on another project, and the third partner that I'm working with on a third project is definitely a competitor of the first partner. So I need to be able to work together, but I need to keep everything at an arm's length. In this scenario, I can set up Radiant Logic in both organizations and build a bridge between the two. And again, because I'm the traffic cop, I control what information flows. Only certain information gets to move between organizations. It's segregated, so again, I'm not adding everyone to Active Directory and opening up trust where everybody can see everybody else. You only see what you've been exposed to. You only see the information that's been formatted and structured and delivered to you. So as a partner, I only think I'm the only partner this company has, and boy, isn't it wonderful that no one else is competing with me, when in essence, there's a whole bunch of other similar scenarios going on in parallel that I can't see. As the administrator of the company, though, I have a global view of everything, so I can look down through my organization and see these little silos I've created within my partner network. Also, if you're doing a merger and acquisition, and the intention is not to keep that company, not to absorb it, but to build that company up, to use your technology to enhance their supply chain, to enforce their sales organization, and really make that much more profitable, and then a year or two from now, spin that company out and take the value of that merger as an actual divestiture. Or if you're a large organization, like right now we're talking to a very large company that's I'll call it generic enterprise. they are going to break themselves up into 3 Fortune 100 companies. So 1/3 of this company is a Fortune 100 company all on its own, and they're divesting these functions because their decision was made that these organizations operate more efficiently in their own vertical, in their own area, whether it's aerospace or medical. So the idea of being able to cleave these organizations apart makes it very simple and very easy, especially if you get into regulatory scenarios where acquiring one company is only authorized by the FTC if you divest yourself of other resources. If you have the ability to quickly just break that connection between these organizations, I've left you with a fully functional IT infrastructure. We worked together wonderfully in the time we were together, but now that we're separated, I am now autonomous and you're autonomous going forward. And again, this works with partners. It works also if you're in the DoD and you need to work with foreign alliance partners. You need to work with Australia or Japan on operations in the Pacific. The ability to bring together identity information from completely disparate environments and use that and leverage that information and present that to the applications as if you were one big virtual environment. So there's a few more things you can do in Radiant Logic. I'll just touch on those briefly so you have an idea of the capabilities of the product. So one of the things we run into quite often is I need to flatten out this hierarchy that I built. I built all this around the old AD model, but I need something nice and flat because I'm going into Azure. I need to provide single sign-on. We can actually remap all the identities, groups, and structure within an organization and create a view of the information that looks very flat. But at the same time, we can also create virtual hierarchies. So if you've got a flat AD environment that you've created for your current modern directory structure, and you've got legacy applications from the acquisition that are expecting a hierarchical model with an extended schema, different data mapping sets, I can build a view of that data sourced from the same information that's in my primary AD domain and present that to that application. So now I can sunset that old legacy LDAP or AD environment that's been hanging off my directory since the acquisition 3 years ago, because I can use my sources of truth of information and make it look like the old world without having to stand up a whole different infrastructure. We had a customer actually migrate off of eDirectory. They had a lot of their applications on eDirectory infrastructure. We were able to model eDirectory schema, structure, everything they had. We populated it from sources of truth. And when they switched over, they basically remapped the DNS endpoint from the eDirectory infrastructure to Radiant, never told the application owners they were switching out the back end. Nobody knew. It looked and acted exactly like it had, but they'd moved off that infrastructure completely. We were able to turn it off and cut all the savings out that they could get from that. Also, dealing with nested groups is a real challenge for twofold. One, in a merger, I don't know what you have access to in a nested group. I can't tell. I don't have a member of attribute in your profile or a way to easily find out. Also, in a governance and IGA platform, if I'm doing account review and I'm looking at groups you're a member of, nesting is not going to be something I'm going to be easily able to operate with. So we can unnest those groups, flatten them out, create groups that are populated with the users explicitly, and populate the member of attribute in those groups so that I can see exactly who has access to every group and why they have it. And then I can dynamically create groups based on attributes. If you're looking at zero trust at all, you're moving towards an attribute-based driven model for authorizing access, I can build groups based on attributes in Radiant Logic dynamically. Based on a filter, you're in Chicago, you work on large accounts, you work for Dieter Schuler, you get access to a membership in this group, which gives you rights to do certain things in Salesforce. If you move to New York, I'm going to refactor that group, remove you, and put you in the proper groups in New York, and I can make those appear to be static groups to applications that only understand static groups. The value here is I'm no longer manually provisioning and deprovisioning groups. I'm looking at attribute values, and as you move in the organization, as you leave, as you change your profile, your group memberships are automatically adjusted. This doesn't have to replace all of your groups, but you can start by moving towards a model where I'm doing much more dynamic group management. The applications don't know the difference. They still see a member of or a list of members in a group. And as you move towards a policy-based enforcement in a zero trust model, you've already built the filters, you built the policies already that determine how you get access to a resource. So now I can start to lay those into a more conventional attribute-based access control system. So I'm going to take a breath, and open it up for questions if anybody has any. Sir. Sure. Yes. Yeah. Mhm. Yep. Yeah, you can definitely look at that as a model. We see that quite a bit where there is such an investment made in one platform or the other. Maybe one was really optimized for contract and contingent workers, and the big PeopleSoft platform or Workday platform wasn't, that wasn't what they got it for. You need the functions of both, or just the lift. A lot of times we find that HR is not necessarily working hand in glove with the IT organization. They're kind of their own animal, and they'll do what they want when they want to. So you may not be able to control when they decide to finally migrate or merge those together. One of the advantages of having Radian in between is you can maintain both of those. You can make one look like the other for applications that are expecting a particular version that came from one organization or the other. I can also insulate my downstream applications from changes in HR. What we've seen in a lot of governance implementations is that a lot of the code and governance platforms, the policies and the role management, role mining and all that is coded, it's written. And so when you in HR change the field name from first name to F name, everything downstream that was looking for field name stops working. With Radian, I can just simply remap with a mouse click in a few minutes that back to the format that the endpoint's looking for. I don't have to have HR undo what they did, and my system now works again. Now I may decide to go ahead and recode that to the new model, but I have an ability to automatically get out of that. Or another challenge is for a lot of organizations, I've got contractors, I have interns, I have partners, I have employees, and they all look different in my HR systems and my contract management systems. But my IGA just wants to know I have a new hire, and it all looks like it's formatted in the same way, and maybe some different field attribute values. So I can take that information and normalize it down to a feed that my IGA platform understands much more easily. So when I'm coding and deploying that system, I don't have to write all the variations for that. So yes, to answer your question, a very long answer, yes. Any other questions? And thank you very much. That was a great question. Denise, you got any questions for me? No? All right, so I am going to let everybody go, and thank you very much for attending. Again, mergers and acquisitions are probably something you're going to run into if you haven't already. Definitely look at Radiant Logic. I will leave you with one last use case. In 2008, we went through a financial crisis. The mortgage industry absolutely collapsed, virtually overnight. And Bank of America was told they were going to have to absorb Merrill Lynch. And Wells Fargo was told they had to absorb Wachovia, the country's largest mortgage company that had like half of the mortgages in the United States. If Wachovia had flattened out and basically shut their doors, we would have probably not recovered. Wells Fargo turned to the federal government and said, excuse me, we're in a financial crisis, the bottom's falling out of the market, Bear Stearns just disappeared off the map, and I've got to stop and merge with a company as big as I am? Yes. They brought Radiant Logic in 4 weeks. We had people in people in Wells Fargo working on Wachovia applications and managing Wachovia data and keeping Wachovia alive. We have Wachovia people working with the Wells Fargo people to be able to tell them what they had, how it worked, and start integrating their systems, getting them on a common mail platform. Because they were virtually able to connect those two organizations in a matter of weeks, they were able to get working. And then they had basically all the time in the world to clean the back end up. And I think in 2012 or 14, I ran into somebody who used to work at Wells Fargo, and he said, there's still Wachovia servers running on the Wells Fargo network, because with Radian in between, there's no reason to touch them. We just let the data flow through, and we look at it like it's all homogenized data. This works in the real world. It does transformational work in terms of an M&A challenge. So take a look at it if you need it. Thank you.